Welcome to the Empowerment Hour podcast, your digital classroom where individuals across all ages, backgrounds, and career levels tune in to get their weekly dose of inspiration and motivation. It's where passion and purpose intersect. I am your host, Nancy Ruffin, the self-proclaimed Latina Oprah, and your very own personal success coach. My goal is to help you discover your purpose and take inspired action so that you create a life where you feel fulfilled and empowered. So if you're ready to start living on purpose, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Empowerment Hour podcast. It is your girl, Nancy Ruffin, and thank you for locking us in for yet another week. We are officially in back to school mode, guys. And I don't know about you all, but I am still trying to get back into this back to school routine. I have to tell you that I got comfortable over the summer months, not having to wake up extra early, not having to get the kids ready for school, not having to comb hairs and pack lunches and all of that additional stuff that we as parents have to do once the kids are back in school. And so I'm still trying to get back into that mode. My kids started back school this past week. My youngest actually started pre-K 3, and she was so excited to be in school and to be in the big girl class. And it was just so, a little bit sad because it's also a reminder that she's growing up and that she no longer is that little baby that I brought home from the hospital. She is very independent. She is very vocal in her ideas and her opinions and thoughts. And she communicates really, really well for a child who isn't even 3 years old yet. She will officially turn 3 in November. So she's maybe 22 months now. But it was just one of those moments that kind of makes your heart swell as a parent, because you see, even in these small milestones, how you have to start letting them go, right? We can't protect our children for their entire lives as much as we may want to. Part of our job as parents is being able to raise independent, self-sufficient human beings so that they can go out into the world and, contribute to the world, but also take care of themselves. And a lot of that, it starts, now when they're younger, and how we instill self-confidence and self-esteem, and how we equip them with the proper tools to be able to support themselves and defend themselves and advocate for themselves. All of that starts in these early years. And it's crazy because even at just 2 years old, I can see the incredible amount of self-confidence that my little one has. And she just is not afraid to put herself out there. She isn't shy. She holds her own with kids who are older than her. And even with my oldest one, whose personality is a little bit different from Alexa's because she's a little bit more reserved. She's a little more quiet. She's still really, really confident. She's super sure of herself. She's not afraid to take chances. It's just really great to see that the traits and the characteristics that I have been working actively to instill in them are really starting to unfold, and so my hope is that they continue to embrace these different things about themselves. And, for those of you who may be struggling with some of these things with your own children, One of the things that I do every single morning is I really speak greatness into my kids. And the reason that I do that is because I understand that what we say to our kids becomes their inner voice, right? Subconsciously, they are soaking up everything that we are telling them. So if we are constantly berating them, if we are constantly bringing them down, if we are constantly telling them that they're not good enough, that they're doing things wrong, that they're stupid, that they're this or that they're that, they will internalize that, and that will become their inner voice when they get older and as they become adults, and they're going to carry that with them for the rest of their lives. But on the contrary, if we change the way that we speak to our children and we speak words of greatness into them, if we tell them how wonderful they are, how smart they are, that it's okay to make mistakes, that it's okay, to not always get things right, that as long as they continue trying and not giving up, that eventually they will make it, right? These are the things that I say to my kids every single morning. Even at 2 and 6 years old, I send my kids out into the world knowing that who they are at this very moment is enough, that they have been perfectly made in God's image, that they are equipped with everything that they need to be successful, and that as long as they go out there, as long as they try their best, as long as they try and they don't give up, there is nothing that they cannot accomplish. And so every single morning before I head to work and before they get to school, these are the things that I say to them. I tell them, have a good day. Try your best. Mistakes are okay, and don't give up. Every single morning. And so I see that by just saying those simple things to them, that they're not afraid to take chances. They're not afraid to start new things, because they understand that even if they try something and even if they fail, even if they don't succeed the first time, if they continue trying and practicing and not giving up, that they eventually can master it. And so these are just some small suggestions that I offer you, to start using with your own children, and then kind of see if you see a change in them. Because I will tell you, this parenting thing, it's not easy. There is no handbook on how to parent a child. Every parent is different. Every child is different. And you have to do what works for you and your child. Never allow yourself to be discouraged or to be put down in how you're parenting your child by someone else, because what works for somebody else and their child may not necessarily work for you and your child. So you have to do what works for you, and know that there's no wrong or right way. As long as you are loving your children unconditionally, supporting them, being there for them no matter what, that is what makes a great parent. Okay, whether or not you allow them to do certain things by a certain age, or whether you're spoiling them by buying them too much or not giving them enough, none of that really determines whether or not you're a great parent. But instead, what matters is the time that you're spending with them, how you're helping to develop their sense of self. Do your kids feel loved? Do they feel safe? Do they know that they can come to you and count on you no matter what? That is what makes a great parent. And as long as you're doing those things, who cares what anyone else has to say? So I hope that you all have had a great first week back to school. I hope that you're getting into the routine of things, and hopefully by next week things will be better for me. I just want to kind of share a couple of reminders with you, because October is just around the corner, and I am hosting an event on October 20th with Stephanie the Life Architect, BLC New York on Instagram, and Cynthia Branch, Therapy with Cynthia on Instagram. And the event is really focused on sisterhood and colorism. It's about having open and honest conversations on what it means to be a black and brown woman in this country, and how historically we have been pitted against one another, how we have been conditioned to believe that we have to be in competition with one another. And when I'm talking about, black and brown, I am talking about African Americans, black Puerto Ricans, white Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Haitians, my Caribbean and West Indian, sisters. It's all of us under this umbrella of colorism, and how, for whatever reason, we are constantly going back and forth with one another. We all deal with a lot of the same things. This conversation is very necessary because we are seeking to provide a really safe space to have this open, and honest dialogue. We're going to be talking about skin color, ethnicity, hair texture, culture, language, what all of that means within the landscape of America, and even within our own families, because we see a lot of division even in Latina families amongst Black and white Latinas. And the problem that, for whatever reason, we have with one another. So I encourage you to buy a ticket to this event. Tickets are now they're now on sale on Eventbrite. The link is sisterhoodpart1.eventbrite.com. And this is a part 1 because this is a series of conversations that we are going to have, because we understand the complexity of the conversation. And so there's no way we're going to touch on everything during this event, but this is the beginning of that conversation. And I encourage you to get a ticket for yourself. If you have young daughters, I encourage you to bring them as well. Cousins, sisters, your mom, your grandmom, friends. We want you all, because we want you to be a part of this very necessary conversation. With that being said, I also want to remind you, if you have not already done so, make sure that you're subscribed to the Empowerment Hour. We are currently on Apple Podcast, we're on Spotify, we're on iHeartRadio, we're on Google Play Music, on Stitcher, on Spreaker, on the internet. We are everywhere. So there's no reason why you're not following or you're not subscribed on any of these digital platforms where you stream this podcast on. Additionally, if you have not already done so, kindly rate us, leave us a review. If you love us, let us know. If there's something we can do better, let us know that too, because we are open to all feedback and opinions. And the only way that I can provide you with the things that you want to hear is by knowing what it is that you want. So feel free to shoot me a DM, an email. There's so many different ways to get in contact with me. Just head over to my website, www.iamnancyruffin.com, and just click on any of the ways to get those messages to me. Now, to focus on this week's podcast, I'm really stoked about this week's podcast. One, because there's a number of things going on this month in September. For those of you who may not be aware, September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And cancer is something that is really close and dear to me, because my husband is a cancer survivor. He had been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma when he was 30 years old. He was diagnosed stage 2. And through an aggressive treatment of chemotherapy, he has since been in remission for over 15 years. Thank you, Jesus. But when I think about everything that he endured as a 30-year-old man, battling and fighting this disease. And when I think about that in relation to children, it just, it really breaks my heart. And I have someone in my family, actually, a 10-year-old cousin. He's actually the son of my first cousin, and he was recently diagnosed with brain cancer, and he's a twin, and it's scary, especially if you're a parent and you have children. If you think about any of the worst things that can happen to our child, the last thing that we want is for them to be sick or to have to deal with a life-threatening illness such as cancer. And so I just wanted to bring some awareness that this month is, Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And I really just want you to take a second and put your own life into perspective and think about all of the things that you might complain about on a daily basis, the things that you struggle with, or whatever you're using to kind of beat yourself up about your life, about where you are in your life or where you're not currently in your life. When you take a step back to think about all of these children who are fighting for their lives, the stuff that you and I are going through is nonsense. It's so small in comparison, right? Because we have young kids, babies even, just fighting to stay alive. So whatever it is that you're going through today, just pray on it, let it go, give it to God, and just be thankful that that is your struggle right now. Be thankful that that is the only thing that you have to concern yourself with right now, because it could always be worse. And I just want to give a quick shout out to another little boy who is fighting leukemia, 5-year-old King. I posted about him recently on my Instagram, and this kid is a trooper. If you have not connected with him, or if you're not following him, I encourage you to go check out his page, King Fights Cancer, and you can really get a behind-the-scenes look at what it's like for a 5-year-old to fight this horrible, horrible disease. My thoughts and prayers are with King, with his family, with my own cousin Daniel, and with his mom Linda, and his brother and his dad, and all of those who really love him. I pray for their well-being. I ask that God heal their bodies, that he gives them strength, that he also, give strength to their families who have to stay strong so that they can help their children fight this horrible, horrible disease. And I ask that you all say a prayer for them as well, because I wholeheartedly believe in the power of prayer. I believe in miracles, and I know that our Lord is a good Lord and he answers prayers. And now, to bring us to this week's episode, September is also National Renters Month. And this week, I am actually talking to two women who are advocates for affordable housing, and they're bringing awareness to the affordable housing crisis in this country. As you may know, and as you probably have been seeing maybe within your own communities, gentrification is a huge thing. And while I believe that it's great to revitalize our communities and our neighborhoods and really build them up and invest in them, it's important to do that, but to also maintain the integrity of our neighborhoods, meaning that you can't push the people out who have been there for 30, 40 years because you want to make it a better place to live. And I grew up in Williamsburg, and so I saw firsthand what this neighborhood has become. Because today it is very trendy, it is very chic. There are a lot of transplants, who have moved into the Williamsburg area, and it's nothing like I remember growing up in the 80s. The bodegas are almost non-existent. The people, who made up these communities, a lot of them have been pushed out, or they have been enticed to move away. They get money. These landlords or these developers come in and they offer them, a small amount of money and, to get them to move out, and they do. But this week I am actually talking to Ali Solis. She is the CEO of Make Room, a nonprofit foundation. It's a national advocacy group, for affordable housing, and it really works with families who find themselves in these situations where they can't afford, their rent. And Ali and her group, they have a lot of resources, and they provide a lot of help to these underserved communities and to these individuals who need the help. I'm also talking to a local artist, Lola Lovenotes. She is an artist from the Bronx, and she has joined forces with the Make Room organization, and she is using her art as a way to bring awareness to the affordable housing crisis in this country. So in this episode, it's broken down into two segments. The first segment, I'm talking to Ali Solis, and she's really getting into the details of the crisis in this country. We're talking about the most vulnerable people, which includes children, people of color, the elderly, our veterans who, go and really put their lives on the line, for this country. And when they come back home, they have no support. There's no resources to kind of help them readjust and get back into society. And so we're talking about all of this, and we're talking about what we can do individually and collectively as a society to make sure that our local and state politicians are looking at this and that they're making this a priority, because the reality is that we're all really just one crisis away from being homeless. And so that's why it's important to have groups like Make Room. So Ali's going to be telling us a lot about what she does and the reason why she's so passionate about this work. And then in the second segment, I'll be talking to Lola, and she'll be talking about her art and the work that she does and how she's using her art to spread awareness and really to shed light on something that is happening all across the country. So with that said, and without any further ado, here is this week's conversation with Ali Solis and Lola Lovenotes. Enjoy, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Empowerment Hour podcast. I am your host, Nancy Ruffin, and this week we are talking with Ali Solis, who is the president and CEO of Make Room, a national advocacy nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. Now, for those of you who may not know, September is National Month for Renters. And so for me, it was really important to have Ali come on and really discuss with us the work that she and her organization do, because affordable housing affects 25 million Americans. Of those 25 million Americans, 9 million are children from predominantly Black and Latino families. So these are our communities. And about 11.4 million households pay more than half of their income on rent. So when we're looking at issues like gentrification and not being able, when we're seeing our people kind of getting pushed out of their neighborhoods and their communities, an organization like Make Room is really important and critical to helping our people and ensuring that they have access to affordable housing. So please join me in welcoming Ali Solis to the show. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you so much for having me on this important show and this opportunity to talk to so many folks who may actually be experiencing this issue firsthand. As you mentioned, Nancy, housing affordability is a crisis that's impacting disproportionately communities of color, Latino families, African Americans, Asians, and others. And this is not an issue that's happening just in coastal markets. We are seeing increasingly that housing affordability is a problem in small towns, rural communities. I just came back from Erie, Pennsylvania, which is not a community that someone would think about as having an affordable housing challenge. And yet, 1 in 4 renters in America are forced to pay more than half of their income to rent, which means, especially if you're a low wage worker, you don't have enough money to pay. Today was the first day of school in our community. And so, imagine being a mom who doesn't have enough money to pay for, shoes to send their kids to school on the first day. These are real issues and real choices that Americans are facing every day.
Right. So one of the things I really wanted to talk about is under your leadership, the organization, you were able to get a bill passed in Congress. Yes, that has to kind of do with affordable housing and how that kind of affects our most vulnerable communities. Can you talk to us a little bit about that bipartisan bill and what it does?
Yes, absolutely. And as someone who has worked on affordable housing issues for much of her career, about 5 years ago, as part of a larger national organization called Enterprise Community Partners, which was our sort of founding entity where we got incubated, we were struggling with the fact that lots of organizations are trying to, find solutions to this issue. And yet, when you think about what are the nation's top priorities, education, healthcare, this issue of housing affordability had never really raised to the level where you were seeing it appear at the top of the fold in the press or during a national election cycle. And so we wanted to create a public awareness campaign and an effort to educate Americans about not just what this means for your neighbors and your, the children that are sitting with your kids in schools. So, not just what it means to us as a society, right? But what it means to us for the future of our generations to come. Because the issue of housing affordability has, many social determinants of health and long-term quality of life components as well. And so you may not care about housing affordability or may not be something that resonates directly with you, but believe me, this is an issue that is going to be front and center for the millions of generations to come and children that are coming. So we created Make Room to raise awareness about the largest growing segment in our population, and that is renters. You mentioned Latinos and African Americans, but seniors and veterans also disproportionately impacted by not having access to an affordable home. So our most important segment of the population, as well as our growing moderate and middle class families who are often working 2 jobs. So most of the families that Make Room is working with are at least working 1 full-time job, and over 70% are working two jobs, and they're still unable to find a place where they have to pay less than half of their income just to find a home that they can afford. And so what we wanted to do was to work with Congress because, again, this is an issue that crosses all kinds of party lines. It is
absolutely,
small towns, rural communities, big urban centers. And we were able to find members of Congress who understood this issue, longtime allies, as well as new members that are coming in and saying, wow, I'm from a small town in Maine, which normally wouldn't be seen as somewhere where affordable housing is a challenge, but it's impacting my community. Or Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where we had a senator, come in and say, yes, I want to raise awareness about the needs of renters in this country. And so we worked last year and we had bipartisan legislation introduced in the House and the Senate. Now, granted, it was commemorative legislation. In other words, no resources or dollars were coming, but it is the starting point to
absolutely
changing the narrative in this country about renters and the needs of renters. And so every September, we will have a National Month for Renters, and we will use this month, not just we have months to commemorate other issues like, breast cancer awareness, other issues. We wanted a month where we could galvanize people from all different sectors to understand why housing is something that impacts us all. And so, yes, Congress and the Senate passed by unanimous consent legislation last year commemorating September as National Month for Renters. And here we are with you kicking off this important month of awareness building and hopefully solutions to address this problem.
Right. I mean, I think that it's really important that the bill was passed, even if it is commemorative, as you say, because the first step for for any change to happen is awareness, right? We need to be aware of what the problem is, of what's going on, and about what we can do individually and as a society, to make this something that's really important, to make sure that our politicians, both at the federal and local level, are keeping this on their high list of priorities, right? So making sure that we're aware is absolutely critical to starting to affect change. Now, what I really wanted to ask you, because you sound extremely passionate about the work that you do, why is this issue something that's so important to you? Why are you so passionate about this work?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I am the product, like many of us, of immigrant parents who came here with a vision for doing better for the families to come. And my experience with housing affordability and kind of the issue with that, I don't think I ever really knew, as most folks don't, right, that my parents were, lower working class family. And, we were lucky enough to be able to find a home, kind of the starter home. But, that vision of where you work really hard, you save for a down payment, you're able to, buy into the American dream of a home as a way to help build assets and values for your family has really changed. And so we saw that with the housing bubble burst, but also with just the challenges as the supply situation in terms of the amount of homes that are affordable. The supply gap continues to grow and incomes are stagnating. So we're seeing the growth in the rental and housing market in terms of costs and development costs grow, but yet the incomes are not keeping pace. And so for me personally, as someone who saw the benefits of being able to get into that starter home, my mom ran a daycare from her house, taking care of kids to, help provide the opportunities that she, didn't really have. But what's interesting is, for me personally, you see firsthand how one life instance that you don't prepare for, you're not ready for, can really change things upside down. And as you and I were talking, Nancy, before the start of the program, my husband had a heart attack very early in my life. I had two young children. They were 9 and 12, and he had just turned 40. And, all of a sudden, he had a massive heart attack and passed away. And I was faced with but for the grace of God, I think some, great support networks of, community and friends and a family that was nearby, that we were able to withstand that. But millions of Americans suffer through these kinds of,
Yes.
Emergency situations. And we don't have systems in place to protect them. We don't have short-term emergency assistance, for example, when somebody has a life-altering event. And I'll tell you firsthand, simple things like, or not so simple, but, having to pay for funeral expenses or a major
Right.
medical issue if someone in your family becomes ill can eat away at any savings that you have and can deem all of us, all of a sudden someone that would have been, quote unquote, a stable family on the brink of losing their home or their housing. So, I saw it firsthand up front and realized that, even though I had been part of this advocacy community for a long time, we needed a new approach. We needed a way to bring those stories of not just human suffering, but also, the opportunity that comes when you're able to get a stable home and really share those stories. Because if we want to convince not just policymakers, but society that this is a national priority, then we need to be sharing those moments where we come together as a country and prioritize this as a major national priority. And so that's really inherently the reason why Make Room was created. It certainly was influenced by my own personal issues in life, but also because I've seen firsthand what an affordable home can mean to a family. Like the Duarte family, if you go to our site on makeroomUSA.org, you'll get a chance to meet with families who are just like you and me, who are working every day to better their lives, to make a better future for their children. And either from a medical emergency or from, some situation that really isn't part of their control. We met with a family in Chicago who, finally found a home that they can afford after leaving a domestic abuse situation, only to find out that the home that they were renting was deemed unlivable by the city. And so, but there were no other options, right? I mean, so this is like this concept that there's a false choice, that if Americans you can just move somewhere else or work harder,
right?
You can find a place to live. We know that the data and these human stories that we've collected from thousands and thousands of families show that not to be true. And the other thing, Nancy, and then I'll stop here, is, we wanted a place where families who are working two jobs, who don't have time to take off from their jobs to go meet with their local council member or to show up at a hearing that may have to, impact affordable housing, that through their smartphones, which pretty much 90% of Americans have, and access to a phone that can be connected to the internet, they can use that to exercise their voice, to share their stories. And so we created a digital platform to really encourage and set a goal of having 1 million, renters engaging and raising their voices about why rental housing in this country needs to be affordable, why we want to have options for everyone, regardless of where they are in their lives, to be able to have access to an affordable home. And that's really the reason that Make Room was created. And we've, been excited about creating this community of almost, 160,000 renters that are actively working to support solutions to address this problem.
I'm thinking about a lot of, you've said it only takes one drastic event in our lives to really, where we can lose it all. And I'm thinking about what happened in Puerto Rico last year with Hurricane Maria, and how many, people found themselves, left with nothing. And when I hear you talk about the work that you're doing with Make Room, I feel like it's just a breath of fresh air to know that there are people like you and the people that work with you and this organization that are really working hard to make sure that, those most vulnerable, people have a voice, and that they're not getting lost in the shuffle and the busyness of things and of life, and just things that the average person may not really think about. It's almost like you said, unless we find ourselves in that situation, right? Affordable housing is not something that we're thinking about.
Totally. And Nancy, I think you mentioned Puerto Rico, which is obviously a very close place to my heart. I still have a lot of family there. My best friend is living there who went through the storm. And to your point, we are just one crisis away from being that family, right? And
yes.
So we pay taxes in this country. We work really hard. It's part of the American ideals and this dream that if you play by the rules and work hard, there will be a system to support you. And we saw firsthand in Puerto Rico that necessarily wasn't the case, right? And so, yes, we need to bring awareness and advocacy. We need to understand what happens to us as a country when we're leaving an entire segment of the population behind and not being prepared. We know disasters, for example, are going to be happening. We did a journalism study tour, which is one of the things that we do. We work with journalists around the country to educate them on solutions that are happening locally, because a lot of the solutions are happening locally. We went to Houston 6 months after the storm to say, okay, here's the housing affordability challenges that existed before the storm, and here's what it looks like today. So already Houston was a place that people didn't think about that had an affordable housing challenge, much like Puerto Rico, right? But to see what happens when devastation comes in the span of 2 or 3 days, and then what it takes to rebuild and not just replace what was lost, but for all of those families that are I'll just talk about Puerto Rico, but Houston was the same thing. The bedrock of the community, the service workers,
yes.
The ones that show up when the electricity is out, when there's no food, the ones that, feed the people, the workers, the emergency workers that are coming into this town. And so, but being able to explain that, humanize it, but also then talk about the quantifiable, implications for us as a society, I think is also important. We need to both speak to the hearts and minds to help people understand why this issue is something that crosses across partisan lines and is about our economy and our future.
And I guess What can I do? What can we do collectively as a society to really spread this awareness?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think partly it's, doing exactly the kind of work that you're doing through this podcast, raising awareness, giving people a voice. Just because you're working two jobs and you may not be somebody who's involved in either a political organization or civically engaged, we need to let people know that their voice matters. Not enough renters in America are voting today, and we need to make people understand that your voice and your vote really does matter. And so sharing your story on platforms like Make Room, finding ways to get engaged, we want to make it easier. So hopefully we're providing a service for renters across the country who, want their stories to be heard and are working hard to make this country all that it is today. And so I think just being able to lift up those kinds of leaders, those organizations that don't always make the headlines, but are working on behalf of those that are voiceless in this country, I think is super important. And the other thing is finding unique partnerships. So one of the things, Nancy, that we're doing this year is a new approach. So for people that may be interested in public art, but may not understand about the housing challenges, we brought together artists from all across the country. We said, okay, we know that many artists, because we've studied this, have struggled with housing affordability challenges. And what if we got artists to kind of demonstrate through their art the challenges of housing affordability? And so we did a national RFP, and we got 11 artists from across the country, more than that for sure, but we selected 11 artists out of the many, many, many wonderful artists that applied. And the idea was we wanted to do a public art display over during the month of September, which is National Month for Renters, as you mentioned, to demonstrate the housing affordability challenges, but through the eyes of artists who had experienced this firsthand. So it was not just they were painting, a picture of something, but they themselves have experienced this issue. And so it was very authentic and real. And so those, on September 13th, we're going to be doing a press conference in Washington, D.C. to unveil one of the doors. And, throughout the month of September, sharing those stories of those 11 artists who spent an entire weekend with all different kinds of art mediums, decorating doors, which are door sculptures that will be featured throughout the city of Washington.
Wow.
For 2 weeks through the month of September. To really understand that the issue of housing affordability, is something that we are all dealing with. And I think it's a powerful way to get people that may not understand, housing or be aware of it.
Yes, and I think it's a creative, out of the box type of way to bring attention and spread awareness to this issue that is very, critical to us as a whole and as a society, because if people can't afford, housing, then a lot of times they end up on the street or they end up in shelters. And so I think,
or doubled up or
right.
in houses. And unfortunately, those numbers aren't the ones that show up on the Census Bureau, right? They show up as homeless. And yet we know that there are so many children whose, average lifespan of how many schools they have to go to a year is 6.
Right.
National average for a housing instability, a family that's living with housing instability, their kids are moving 6 times just to be able to find a place to afford. And that doesn't only impact, Johnny or Susie or Ramon that's in
right.
The person, it's the children that's sitting next to them. And so that's why we talk about the societal impacts of not addressing this national housing affordability crisis.
Well, Ali, I want to thank you for your time and for coming on here and, chatting with me and educating me on something that I didn't know very much about. But you can count on me now to be a partner, on this and spreading the awareness and making sure that people understand the impact and the responsibility that we all have to make sure that affordable housing is a thing for everyone. But before I let you go, how can my listeners learn more about Make Room, and where can they kind of connect with you or with the organization?
So I would encourage everyone to go to makeroomUSA.org. And in the next couple of days, we will be releasing a 2-minute video, which is really the lead off to a campaign called #RepRenters. And it's the stories, it's really, created by stories that we've heard from hundreds and hundreds of renter families across the country. Policymakers and our government system and the private sector has kind of let down our society by not making this an important priority. So I would say go to Make Room USA, sign up to become an advocate, share your story. We're making it really simple for you to contact not just your members of Congress, your governor, your mayor, but all the way down to your city council level, literally. And I did this weekend to test it out. It takes less than 10 minutes. For you to, engage and ask your policymakers. After all, they are meant to represent us, right?
Yes.
So ask them to make this a priority. Make this a priority as we approach midterm elections. Make this as a priority as they're developing, their campaigns and what they're going to stand for. Share your stories. Congressmen, members, state delegates, representatives, they're constantly wanting to turn to their constituents to hear about their stories. And so we hope to make this easy to do through our platform online. And let us know. We want to hear from you. Let us know, what are your struggles? What can organizations like Make Room be doing? We are rolling out an emergency assistance program in Chicago, Miami, and DC. Come to one of those events if your listeners are from those areas. Tell us what else we can be doing and get engaged. This is an important cause. It matters to you, it matters to your children, and it matters to the future of America. So I'm grateful, Nancy, that you had me on today, and I hope that you continue to do more stories about the important work that's happening in this space.
Thank you so much, and continued, success to you and Make Room in all of your endeavors. And I hope to chat with you again soon, kind of to get updates on the amazing work that you guys are doing down in DC. So thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You are tuned into the Empowerment Hour. And in part 2 of this episode, the conversation continues with Bronx-born artist Lola Lovenotes. Welcome back, guys. I am joined now with this segment by a local New York City artist by the name of Lola Lovenotes. And this is really just a continuation of the conversation that I just had with Ali, because we are focusing on the month of September being National Month of Renters. And as Ali mentioned in her segment, Make Room, has expanded, or they put out an RFP for artists because they have this the Doors of Make Room project. And really what it is another way to kind of spread awareness and shed light on this affordable housing crisis that is happening within our country. And so please welcome Lola Lovenotes to the show. Hi, Lola.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so glad to be here. It's my first podcast.
Oh, exciting. We are absolutely excited, to have you on, especially for a topic as important as affordable housing. And one of the things that Ali mentioned when they had put the RFP out and they were looking for artists was that they wanted to select artists that had been personally affected by this housing crisis. So before we kind of get into that, just let my listeners know a little bit about who you are, the kind of art that you create, and then talk to me a little bit about your own experience with affordable housing and how that inspires the work that you're doing.
Well, I'm a, Bronx born and raised artist. I started off doing graffiti when I was in my teen years. And, if you live in New York City, graffiti is a huge part of the culture here, right? So, I was involved in that. And then as I got older, I just realized there's just a lot more that I wanted to do with the graffiti that I was creating. And also just as an artist in general, all around artist, I wanted to paint murals. So I started getting into mural work maybe seven years ago, actively painting murals. And I was at first painting aesthetically pleasing murals, cute characters
Mm-hmm.
on walls in the streets. But as I got older, I'm 28, and it's just there's a lot of important things happening in our neighborhoods that are affecting our communities. So I felt like if I'm going to have such a large platform, as murals, you're painting buildings basically,
Right.
and public spaces. So I'm like, okay, I have to say something. I want to shine light on what's happening in our communities. And so only recently I've actually started painting, combining activism with my art, as well as I can. I'm trying to still incorporate my who I am as an artist, but talk about the community and what's going on here. So growing up in the Bronx, right, like in New York City, gentrification is a huge thing.
Yes, it is.
It's major, and it's especially growing up in the Bronx. The communities here are people of color.
Yeah, I see a
So
lot of gentrification happening now, kind of like the South Bronx and the Mott Haven section that traditionally
mm-hmm.
used to be kind of just abandoned,
Yeah.
warehouses and really empty spaces. And now I just see huge kind of corporations coming in,
Mm-hmm.
and
And
you have
that's
like the
their
Fresh Directs and just these,
right, the Whole
these,
Foods, all of
yeah,
that.
things that we know, right? When you grow up in these urban areas, that traditionally these corporations didn't want to be there. They don't want to
Of
be a part of
course,
these
yeah.
communities.
It's poor neighborhoods, who
Right,
wants to have Whole Foods in a poor neighborhood? Who is that? They can't afford it, right?
right, right,
So, but the thing is that it's by having these warehouses, and like in Mount Haven, right? They have it's kind of like once you get there, it's kind of like you can just a fixer upper.
right.
You go into these neighborhoods and you're like, well, the rent is low here, the property value is low, I can buy it at this low price and create something new and shiny for people to come into. And that sounds nice, but it's not, because those neighborhoods,
Become
they're
unaffordable to
it's
the people that live
unaffordable.
there. Yeah.
And it's bringing and it's pushing people out, and so that's definitely happening all across the country. But seeing it, I feel like it's more when you're in such an urban environment like New York City. It's more of a it happens so fast, and it's kind of like right in your face. 1 minute it's a poor neighborhood, and then the next it's shiny and brand new. It's very disheartening.
You're absolutely right, because I grew up in Williamsburg, and
Mm.
not in today's
Not
Williamsburg.
today, yeah.
you
Right,
know,
when it was predominantly Latino,
and it
and
was very
now,
poor, and there
yeah.
was, I mean, I grew up there, in the 80s, and I go there now, and it's just such a stark difference, and it's so
Mm-hmm.
trendy now, and these, beautiful parks that they've put up, and these beautiful trendy, little cafes and boutiques. And the other day I went, they have like hotels there now on Kent Avenue, Wythe
Yes.
Avenue, that used to be
Yes.
back in the days, where prostitutes were,
Yes. Fast, yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it just amazes me, because I see what these, huge corporations are doing and how they're pushing our people out, because it no longer is affordable. Like, my grandmother still lives in Williamsburg, and I think her building is probably one of the only buildings left that still has, like Latinos living in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But I
it's
think it's
scary.
just a matter of time until they come with like the right price to
Of
buy these
course.
people out, and then that's it. So I absolutely get what you're saying, that it's like I don't even remember the transition, because like you said, it's like
Exactly.
from one day to the next. One day it's this poor, run down place, and then the next day is this, something brand
Mm-hmm.
new and shiny and exotic, and people from all over the country want to come there.
Mm-hmm. And even and it's kind of like they're creating this illusion for the people in the neighborhood too, because they don't know, they're not seeing what's happening behind closed doors and all the discussions on the property value. They're existing, they're living their day-to-day lives, and then 1 minute they see this cute cafe and the parks are being built, and it seems like it's for the people, it's for the
Right.
neighborhood. So they're getting excited too, until one day they realize, oh, they can't afford, all of a sudden the rent is
Yep.
too high and they can't afford to stay there. So it's for our communities, we're very like, it's shocking because you want to be a part of that come up, you want to be involved in the beautification of the neighborhood, but it's sad because it's not for you.
Right.
It's
They
not for
don't make it
us.
affordable for you. They do everything
Exactly.
they can to push you out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess shifting gears a little bit back to, the project that you're working on with Make Room, just to kind of highlight what Ali was saying, really what it is, it's 11 fiberglass doors that will be showcased in 11 different public and private spaces, in high tourist or traffic locations in DC.
Yes.
And, she said that they had a huge selection like of artists to choose from, and they only chose 11. You were one of the 11.
Yes.
First of all, how did you become aware of the project? And then what was it like for you once you got selected and you knew that you would be having to create art that is going to be, viewed and looked at by so many people?
Well, I honestly, it was kind of a blessing. It popped into my lap. I didn't even really know that there was an open call for artists. A mutual friend of ours, Zeta, she's a friend of mine through social media, on my art Instagram, and she emailed me and presented this to me, and she thought I would be a good fit because I've been painting murals, focusing on what's going on in Puerto Rico right now. And so I've been posting that a lot, and I'm trying to get more involved in activism, art and activism together. And so she presented it to me, and I was like, okay, this is what I care about. This hits home for me. I'm from the Bronx. This is happening in my neighborhoods. It's happening to people near and dear to me who can't afford to live here. Most of my friends and family are moving to other parts of the country. That are on.
Right.
It's more affordable to live. So everybody's moving out of New York City. So for me, I was like, this is something I want to talk about. And it was fun to create something for such a big project, but it was also stressful because it's like, how can I create an image that's going to say what I want to say, but also not push, be too aggressive in what I wanted to say. And so, I was speaking to, when I was there painting, they were telling me that my door was a bit controversial because I didn't really want to shy away from what really needs to be said.
Right.
But I had to make it a little bit PC because again, you don't want to make it too aggressive where people are not going to want to even listen to the message. So yeah, I tried to.
So can you briefly kind of, I guess, for those of us that don't have the privilege of seeing the door, what was it that you created?
So so basically they don't really want us to maybe I could say it right. Well, like I can't share the images yet until the press conference on September 13th.
Right.
But I'll just explain it a little bit. So basically what I painted two different images, and they're both focused on affordable housing and displacement. So that's like the major, it's very obvious, what I'm saying. But one of the images that I thought would be which is kind of like a literal representation of what's happening in the Bronx, is I painted a bodega burning, and it's like, right. So it's
I love that.
Yeah,
only
it's
because
beautiful.
I feel like the bodega is like becoming extinct.
Yes, it is exactly. That's like the epitome of culture in New York City.
Yes.
And it's kind of an homage to the Bronx is burning, during the 70s.
Yes.
So right. So it was kind of like an homage to that, because what's going on with the landowners, the building owners during that time. They were like burning the buildings down in order to benefit off the insurance, and it was displacing the communities, right? So it's kind of, this is what's happening today, is essentially that, it's the bodega is our culture. It's burning. It's being whitewashed in a sense. It's new. What's happening with gentrification is new age colonialism, you know,
Yes, it
and
is.
it's an ethnic cleansing. And if you want to get, you know, aggressive with what's going on, it's ethnic cleansing. And so I wanted to show that, and because it's such a drastic, not drastic, it's a very like in your face image of
Right. You can't ignore it. You can't turn away from it.
you can't turn away from it, right?
And I think
so
that it speaks to the truth, though, of what's happening. So it kind of forces people to accept it, you know, and you can't just, you know, turn a blind eye and pretend
you
that
can't.
it's not happening.
You can't. And the, like, you know, bodegas, these are like, that is the one-stop shop for the neighborhood. Like, it's affordable. It's a community-owned business. It's most of them, majority of them, all of them are owned by people of color, you know. So this is the place where families can go to and get anything they need all times of day. You can go in there for detergent and a, you know, bag of chips, you know, your sandwich.
Or a hero.
A hero, yeah, you could get it. You know, you could get a sandwich in the middle of the night. You could
put your numbers, like everything happens in the bodega.
Exactly, that's the place. Exactly, that's like it's the hub of culture in our neighborhoods, and they're decreasing. They're getting pushed out because they can't afford the rent. And what happens is, like, we can't afford to go to Whole Foods. We can't afford to travel, to go to, there's not even, the thing is that in these neighborhoods, that is the only place you can get things that you need, you know? And if you want to get home goods, or you want to get food that's healthy, or, you know, whichever, you have to travel to Manhattan or something, you know, you have to go out of your way. So bodegas are the place that keeps people alive, in a sense, right? So, like, to have that being destroyed is because you're killing the neighborhood, you're killing people, you're killing the home, the families. So it's like, you know, the bodega is something that's so important to our people, to people of color, and it's being eliminated. And that's just, it's violence, basically. It's violence against people of color, what's going on with gentrification. So by creating that image, I felt like that was like the best way to say that message of in a aesthetically pleasing manner, but also in an aggressive manner. Like, this is literally what's going on in our neighborhoods, in our communities.
Yeah. So a couple of times you've mentioned that you want to use your art as a form of activism. And I wholeheartedly believe that artists and creatives play a huge role in affecting change and policy change in this country. I mean, historically and everything, we've seen it, you know, through the works, through artists like yourself, or through writers, or through journalists, people that have captured certain moments in our history. That was done by the creatives. And so I guess, what message do you hope to convey through your own art, you know, in your own way of your form of activism? What is it that you want people to take away when they look at your work?
I just, you know, I feel like art is so powerful. Images, they communicate ideas and emotions, and that's there's huge power in that. And I just feel, you know, like you were saying, as a creator, it's important right now to use that power to spark conversation. So if I can just spark that conversation and, you know, on what's currently affecting our communities, then I feel like I'm doing my job, in a sense. Like, I do believe that I don't feel that everything that you create needs to have a message, or that it needs to be a part of activism, but I do feel that that is our duty right now, because the political climate is scary right now. It's affecting marginalized communities, and a lot of people, they know what's happening on a certain level, but it's kind of like ignorance is bliss, you know. That a lot of people don't want to really see it, you know. They
pretend that it's not happening, because the reality is that, unfortunately, until it happens to us directly, right, we tend not to pay attention to it. Or if we don't know someone that's being affected by it, then it really doesn't become our problem.
Exactly. And it's, and I can't fault people for wanting to feel safer by being by turning a blind eye, because it is scary. A lot of people don't know what to do about these issues, so it's, for me, I feel like as an artist, I have that power. I'm holding this power to show them, okay, hey, like it is scary. This is happening, but let's talk about it. Like, it doesn't have to feel so kind of like where you don't have to. I'm trying to create a platform where I'm trying to bring in people to have the conversation, at least, where it's not
in a
anybody.
non-confrontational way, right? It's not protest or anything. It's a different form of protest,
where art is all inclusive, and it creates by creating a beautiful image, or just an image that is attracting enough with its colors and its composition, that will bring in all types of people to take a look and start talking about what the issue, what the painting or the art is trying to say, because I feel like sometimes through the media, especially the news sources that we have on television right now, they're not telling the real story, and a lot of our communities, that's where they're getting their news, is from, television or online, but they're not getting the whole story. And so they're not seeing what it kind of turns them off in a sense. And then we're having these conversations on a certain level that kind of does alienate people who aren't educated. Some people feel like it's too big for them to understand, and so they don't want to understand. And by creating art that I feel like is visually pleasing, that will bring them in. Okay, why, this is beautiful, what is this trying to say? So then they start looking at it in a different way, and then the conversation can be inclusive for them too,
So I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I want to thank you for being on, for sharing a little bit of your backstory and, kind of enlightening us all on the importance of the affordable housing crisis in America. I can't wait for the images to kind of be revealed to the public. Where can we find them if we want to see them once this the project gets unveiled on September 13th?
So they're going to be displayed on the streets of Washington, D.C. and in public places and high tourist traffic areas. But I also will post on my Instagram, on my website, and hopefully people can check it out through there, or I'm sure.
So tell people where they can find you. What's your website? What's your Instagram?
Okay, so my Instagram is at LoveNotesNYC, and my website is lovenotesnyc.com. I also have a Facebook. It's facebook.com/LoveNotesNYC. So you can find me through just like any Love Notes NYC hashtag. And my name, Love Notes, essentially kind of like is what I'm trying to spread, love and awareness, so
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
So, and I'm New York City based, so that's where it all stems from. So hashtag Love Notes NYC, they can check it out through there. I'm excited to show this is something that's so dear to me, and it's affecting my community, and I just can't wait to really shine a light and speak about this and to our neighborhoods and our community. And there's a lot of people who really need to hear this and see this. It's affecting their neighborhoods and their communities, and it's not there. Some people just don't really understand how badly, and this is definitely gonna spark the conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Lola, for your contribution to this project. I'm excited myself to see the images. I will make sure to share them on my own Instagram once they become available. Yes. And just thank you again for joining me tonight on the conversation. And I look forward to connecting with you in person, in real life, because you are based in New York City. Yes. So let's make that happen.
Yes, for sure. I'm so excited for this. Thank you for having me. This is my first podcast. You found my podcast chair.
Yes! I'm so excited for that. Thank you so much.
So great. And, thank you.
Continued success in all of your future endeavors.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This concludes this week's episode of the Empowerment Hour podcast. Again, I just want to thank my guests, Ali Solis and Lola Lovenotes, for joining me on this week's conversation, on helping to educate me and enlighten me on the affordable crisis, the affordable housing crisis that is plaguing our country. This is something that I think many of us know that it's going on, especially those of us who have grown up in inner city urban communities. We see the gentrification going on. We see how people are kind of getting pushed out of their homes because they can no longer afford the rent in the neighborhoods that they've probably spent the majority of their lives in. It's a very important issue, and I think that it's one that we probably don't think about too often, but really is critical to our overall health as a country and as a society. We want to make sure that our communities have homes to live in, that they can't become homeless, should one crisis affect them. And I think the reality is that many of us, live paycheck to paycheck. And so when we're spending, more than 50% of our income on rent, it's very easy to find ourselves in dire situations, when unexpected setbacks happen. And I think that we all have a responsibility to be concerned about this. We all have a responsibility to reach out to our local and federal, representatives and make sure that this is a priority for them. Midterm elections are coming around soon. Do your research, find out where your local representative stands on affordable housing and find out what they're doing, to combat this crisis, because the reality is this could happen to any one of us. And so don't wait for it to happen to you or to someone you love to care about it and to get involved. Again, so make sure that you guys go and check out Make Room, figure out ways that you can get involved, that you can spread awareness, and make sure that you connect with both Ali and Lola, to kind of stay abreast of the work that they're both doing, to spread this awareness. And so that concludes this episode of the podcast. As always, be kind to yourself and to others, and go out there and crush those goals.